Alright, time for another draftphysics.com, debatephysics.com, also video presentation. So a response video to Sabine Hossenfelder, who has, whatever, every 3 months or something, she talks about theories of everything, a universal theory, which is a unifying theory is probably the better way to state it. Some theory of physics that deals with the facts, like push averse, okay, deals with the fact, like the difference between a something and a nothing, that real things have to interact in real ways for things to happen. Okay, and then you have things like the speed of light, and all the forces move at the same speed, and it's kind of ludicrous to say completely different mechanisms just happen to function under the same rules. It's just kind of stupid to say, oh, okay, it makes sense that they're completely different functions, and yet they have glaring similarities. And the argument is, well, that glaring similarity probably means there is some unifying mechanism, some elemental thing they share in common. So anyway, so physics has all kinds of wacky mechanisms and 400 particles and all kinds of nonsense. And there's no way to unify that crap. And that's why theories fail, is because they try to unify stuff that isn't true. But anyway, she doesn't have a clue, and she's not interested in getting a clue. Clearly, over the years, I've tried to contact her. David DeHilster tried to, she doesn't, she's not interested in participating in any discussion about elemental or the foundations of physics and how they are well underdeveloped and well underproven. Just no interest at all. And that's essential to fixing physics. Just recognize, look, the fact that they've never even bothered to fix the wrong assignment of something as elemental as plus and minus, and make things like electricity rational. I mean, they actually pretend that there's some logic to thinking amperage goes one way in the wire and voltage goes the other way, when of course it isn't true. It's a fake, phony, wrong model, so why keep it? And that's because they're traditionalists. They're just another religion, and they're just here to prop up their commandments. And that's all they're about. So, to the video. I should just have to hit that, I think. And yeah, it worked. So let's play this shit. I haven't watched it yet. So she says the title is, Why Do Theories of Everything Always Fail?
Physicists have been looking for a theory of everything for a century.
So it's really not true. They've been looking for it from the beginning of time, is to find the patterns and to figure out what the mechanisms are. And in every case, they've ruined it with dualities, kinetic energy versus momentum, wave, particle, and then you have antimatter, matter and antimatter, and no doubt anti-forces and anti-fields, and it's just all garbage. Laughable garbage, frankly. In hindsight, I mean, there's going to be nothing to say except, why did everybody fall for this? And how did these arrogant, obnoxious assholes preach this shit with such confidence? Because it is so shitty.
Einstein already tried his hands at it and failed, and
so what he demonstrated, though, was that out of all these people, he was the only one. They're all pussies. Nobody wants to take on the challenge, and it's right there in front of you, saying, "Yeah, this is glaringly stupid. Let's fix it." So Einstein recognized that, it doesn't make any sense. Spooky action. The whole thing is underdeveloped and undercooked. Incomplete is the words used. The whole Schrodinger cat mockery thing It's just too silly. Find a real answer. So he had, it's admirable that he knew there had to be a better answer because this answer sucked.
Who did thousands others after him. If you follow the popular science news, you'll see a new theory of everything popping up every couple of...
Right, and so that's only in their own industry. So it's only the Catholic theory of evolution. So it's kind of pointless to just look within, their box, because their box is all bullshit. They have gotten so much wrong that, there's almost no point in talking about it. I mean, the whole Einstein mystique of his fake notions of let's just proclaim it and not prove anything. Let's just say there's a magical thing that makes the magical thing happen. When Newton could have said that, but he was too much of a scientist to say that.
Weeks, and then you never hear of them again. I've done a lot of videos in which I look at those new theories.
Right, so she won't look at. All right, so that's just bullshit. She'll only look at what somebody's already looked at and said, oh, look, this looks like something, because it has a whole bunch of math in it and it's all convoluted and wooey. But that's it. So she'll only look at another book written in Latin talking about smoking urns.
It's because you never know. Maybe one of them is the real deal.
So the real deal is that, look, I offered her thousands of dollars to deal with the kinetic energy argument, to, give me my 5 minutes to make a few arguments about how it has to be a push-averse, the simulation, all that stuff, and she will pay attention to nothing, even with being, somebody just saying, look, I'll pay you to look at it, and she still won't.
But today I want to go through the main reasons for why I think that these theories all fail and what I think is the...
So again, it's just... So this is like one of the Wright brother kind of arguments, because the plane isn't working, so it never will work. This is the crap people do. Useless. Frankly. But yes, in the context of somebody trying to unify quantum mechanics and relativity, you will fail, because they're both nonsense. Neither one of them is a rational description of reality.
The most promising approach. The first reason these theories of everything all fail is that they're not actually theories of everything.
Okay, so the idea is if you have a theory of some elemental function, that elemental function will eventually cause everything. So it's sort of like the Feynman argument, where even Feynman's describing this search for, is it a checkerboard? Is it Chinese checkers? Is it hopscotch? And there's this kind of subtle argument that it can't be more than one game. So it's one game with some simple rules, and the idea is it could be a very big board, and that's why it's very hard to see the simple rules, is because the board itself is complicated. And the mere fact is that the real universe, the electrons, protons, the force, is tiny. Okay, and we can't just look at it and see it and watch it and see what it does. It's infinitesimally small and moving insanely fast, and therefore, we can't see it but in a fog, and so we have to deduce it. And the test is for a scientist: are you a good detective? Are you a Columbo, or are you Clouseau?
A theory of everything, if you remember, is one that combines the four fundamental interactions.
Okay, so the four fundamental interactions are bullshit, okay? The strong force is nonsense, because that's just an electron between two protons. The weak force you could forget about. And all you're left with after that is just understanding that the basic universe runs on this speed of light stuff, causing matter to move.
electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear interactions, and gravity.
So this is a silly statement to say that somehow you have to unify these things that, again, could be argued don't exist. I mean, if you believe in the strong force, then you have to believe there's some, whatever it is, a gluon that bounces into something and this something goes in the opposite direction. So it's all anti-momentum, anti-rational. It has nothing to do with a push-averse. It has to do with a magic-averse. The basic fundamental mechanism is retarded. And electromagnetism is, again, you're taking two different phenomenon in the sense of you have a sound wave and light created, say, by an explosion. Yes, the explosion is the thing, and it creates these two different phenomenons. So the phenomenons are not the element themselves, and that's the thing they're not getting, is that it's the same force, it's just in a different arrangement. So I could argue that photons are just bits traveling, okay, like Morse code with a distance between them. That's the frequency. And that magnetism is that signal, but spread out in terms of it has two forms to it, two colors. And it makes another different pattern that only things that are magnetic, or that can be polarized, can see. Yeah. And general relativity is just nonsense. So the relativity nonsense is just useless. It's not even a force. It's not a thing. Relativity isn't a thing. So usually they include gravity in here somewhere, but nope.
In one framework. The first three of those are quantum theories, gravity is not. The problem with these theories of everything is that they don't include the quantum part in its entirety.
So the quantum part is just, ideally would just be the argument that it's very small. It's discrete but small. That's quantum, that it comes in clumps. So the clump-averse idea. So I don't know if she's saying that somehow all these theories don't recognize or concede to the existence that the universe might be made out of elemental clumps. But certainly that would be the definition of particle physics. But clearly particle physics is wave physics. So the whole thing is just lost because they've destroyed all vocabulary. You can't have a rational conversation about physics because they've changed the definition of all the words. Kinetic energy at one time just meant active energy, not stored energy. And then it became 1/2 mv squared. And it must be 1/2 mv squared. It can't be momentum.
Mean is that they do not include the measurement process in quantum physics.
So whatever that nonsense is, everything in the universe is in the universe, and it's over time exposed to the universe. The universe reacts to everything's existence in some way or other. You can't be a thing in the universe and not be reactive, in the sense that you will hit something or something will hit you. And there'll be a signature of your existence in the fact that something changes because you're in there changing it. You're occupying space. The fact is, we all leave a signature on society by the space we take up, by the conversations we have, by the distractions we create. We change the world. It's just a fact. Seeing those changes, that's the tricky part. Sometimes they're obvious, because you took out a gun and shot your wife or something, and sometimes they're not so obvious.
None of them does. And what's the theory of everything that...
So this measurement problem is just absolute theoretical mush. So this is the Schrodinger cat mockery joke. There is no capacity for any electron or proton to ever be entangled, because there's no place in the universe it can go where it could travel any distance at all where it's not interacting with gravity and the whole electromagnetic spectrum that's bombarding everything all the time. You can't move out of the heat, and the heat is measuring you. the heat is a camera.
Doesn't explain how a measurement works. How is that everything? Let me be.
All right, so this is all kind of just drivel, how a measurement works. So obviously, an elemental theory you can't. There's no rulers in the element. The ruler has to be made out of the same elements. So there's no ruler for whatever it is that you're going to make as the smallest stuff. But the fact is, if I describe the universe as having BBs in it, and an untold number of them moving in straight lines with a velocity that's the speed of light, or a very fast velocity, and then said the matter bit, the smallest piece of matter in that field of BBs, is a basketball. There, I've started with a mechanism. Now, we can't measure any of that stuff, but there's not going to be any ruler made out of something smaller than that elemental universe. But the fact is that elemental universe is the place that the events are all happening in, and nothing can escape those interactions and leaving a signature behind. We can't necessarily see the signature, but it's there. I mean, if a ray of light hits a grain of sand and knocks it over, and off the top of another piece of sand, it's changed the universe. There's a signature of the ray of light's existence.
Concrete. A measurement is done by a detector, and a detector is made of particles which are in the standard model. So a theory of
So again, they have the presumption is that somehow this unification theory has to be made out of this nonsense, and I guarantee you, no good theory will ever be made out of this crap.
everything really should explain it, but none of the theories of everything I have seen does that. They don't explain the measurement process.
So no, all your obligation is just displaying how does charge work. So I can give you the simplest possible definition of how charge works. You just have an electron force and a proton force, which they've already conceded exists, and they just have an inverse effect on each other, and you'll create repulsion between similars and attraction between dissimilars. I mean, once you have that, then you have the creation of nucleuses, and you're off onto the races. And then you can explain gravity as a simple argument that, well, if the force has all of the momentum, that is, it has all the velocity, and it sticks to electrons and protons and gives them momentum, then you could understand that obviously force going in something, if it has to move matter, it's going to move a lot slower. And so the force won't progress in the universe as quickly if it's pushing matter. And therefore it will be diminished in its capacity to move stuff if it's already moving stuff. And clearly the Earth is very hot in the core. Clearly it makes all kinds of perfect sense that, yes, there's a bunch of force going through the Earth. It's heating the Earth. And the byproduct is less energy gets to the surface at any one moment of time. And that's gravity.
Not string theory. Why is anyone even surprised that it doesn't work? The second reason is that a theory of everything isn't necessary.
So we're talking about a unification theory, and the argument is it's necessary if you're a reasonable person. If you're a reasonable person, you want to know why gravity is moving the same speed as photons, which are moving the same speed as whatever magnetism is, which is moving the same speed as light. You want to know why these things are all bound by the same fundamental rule. You want to know why, look, there's an inverse square law for a light bulb emitting photons. And then gravity is the opposite direction, but exactly the same rules. So it makes perfect sense that gravity has to be made out of some mechanisms doing what light bulbs do in reverse. And you could even argue that it's very much the reverse in the sense that the energy is going into the bulb and heating it, that kind of thing.
What I mean is that there is a discrepancy between the standard model and general relativity.
Right, so they might as well just give up right there. No, I mean, it's just... there's no point in arguing it, but general relativity doesn't say anything. It's not a theory of what causes gravity. There's no theory for a mechanism. It just says magically things behave as if there were photons moving into the object, pushing something. I mean, that's how they teach it. They teach it by teaching it like it was a reverse light bulb. And they'll use water or some other mechanism to be the pushing mechanism. But that's how they teach it.
Because the standard model has quantum properties, whereas general relativity doesn't.
So whatever these quantum properties are, these made-up functions of spin and some other nonsense, and it's all nonsense.
All right, but resolving this does not require one common framework, loop quantum gravity or asymptotically.
So this is all, like I said, this is all jargon and woo. It's all more complicated, not simpler. It's nothing. Doesn't look anything like some kind of theory that's going to fix what's broken. And again, you're talking about an elemental universe, and they keep giving these elemental mechanisms all of these fancy ESP particle functions, all this wooey entanglement nonsense. So as long as you're going to keep doing that, you're never going to find the truth, because that's just magic, woo, voodoo. That's just religion.
Say if gravity, for example, resolve this tension by giving quantum properties to gravity, but without also merging gravity with the standard model in a common framework.
So again, the standard model is, it was just as simple as electrons and protons, and then the force that moves them. There was a day when that's all you needed to know, and it all made some sense. And again, it's all these particle physicists with their accelerators who made up these projections about what happened. So they see something happen and they make up a story to tell you what happened. And it's all just made up. There's no truth value. They're just telling a fable.
The reason this matters is that because a common framework for a theory of everything is not mathematically necessary, one does.
So whatever that even means, it's not mathematically necessary to have a consistent ingredient mix, that you can't make it out of nothing. You have to make it out of something. The ingredients of the stuff that the actors have to have the properties that enable them to do these things, and you can't, there's just there's no room for magictons. I mean, again, just the very idea that they even think there's some hope that it's actually true, that some particle billions of light years away from each other could in some way react as if the other one could read its mind or know its condition. The very fact they think that's a possibility is amazing, amazingly doopy.
Doesn't know what mathematical assumptions to make. This brings in a lot of ambiguity that physicists.
So math is just bean counting in some way. So again, math is a formalization of a function. So you're taking something and you're saying, what can I do to make it simple? What's the simplest description of the thing? And so you can do its dimensions, you can do its mass, you can do some way to just simplify what it is. And that's all math is. So the whole quantum idea is the idea that this is actually made out of a billion somethings. I could break it into those pieces, and then those somethings can have all of these properties that are elemental. But this isn't elemental. Again, the real universe is electrons and protons being pushed around by force. You want to call it fields? Go ahead, but they're not fields. They're just force. It's just stuff getting rained on, pushed.
Physicists fill in with guesswork. This is the problem, for example, with Gerrit Leesy's E8 or Eric Weinstein's geometric.
Well, look, we know Weinstein's theory doesn't have any. There's no continuity. It's gibberish. Hours of gibberish.
unity. They make extra assumptions because they particularly like one or the other mathematical structure. But why this structure? Why not some other? And all this guesswork makes failure near certain.
So again, what makes failure near certain is including nonsense. Just adding nonsense to nonsense to nonsense to nonsense, and you're not going to make sense. That's not going to pop out.
The third reason is that the theory of everything might not be a final theory, yet everyone assumes that.
So some things we know for sure, okay? Water's wet. We invented the word wet to describe a property water has. So you can go through this and say, look, we do know some things. The speed of light, pretty reliable. The idea of the conservation of motion in the universe, pretty reliable. So there's lots of things, thermometers working, lots of things we can be quite confident of that theory of function. Now again, causes are more complicated. Recognizing what it does is easy. Recognizing how or why it does it, that's the hard part.
This is so. What I mean is that they all assume that a theory that combines the standard model with general relativity should itself.
What's all this crap?
Not leave any open questions. It must work at all energies. There is nothing more below this theory of everything. It's the final piece in the puzzle or nail in the coffin, whatever your perspective.
Whatever. And you've all said those words about your weak evidence. So they've all said, the double slit experiment nail and coffin evidence of a wave theory. No, it isn't. So again, all these exaggerations, they don't test anything, they don't measure anything, they just make up fake little stories. None of them can tell you the truth about what the double slit actually produces as actual patterns. They don't detail any of it, they don't give you the truth, they give you this sloppy, it just creates a thing, a wavy thing. It's terrible science.
I'd say that the theory is also final and complete as an additional assumption, and maybe it's assuming too much.
So the whole Occam razor thing is sort of the test. So if you can if you can make something happen for four little actions happen and something happens, and you're saying, okay, that's all it takes is just stir and bake. It's a simple recipe, a simple process. And how do you get any simpler? So you want a cake at the end, and how do you get any simpler than, okay, flour, sugar, water, milk, butter, whatever, stir, pan, bake, cake. So there's a point where you can't get any simpler. There's no simpler mechanism that could produce the outcome that isn't just magic.
Why not turn back on the ambition and just combine the standard model with gravity? Maybe that combination is.
So again, gravity isn't anything. Gravity is the inverse square law. And you're saying, well, what's causing the stuff to move? And you're saying it's a nothing force, bent geodesic thing. There's no mechanism. It doesn't come from anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't have any role in the cause and effect universe. It's a completely separate mechanism that might as well just be called Mr. Magic, or the angels did it. They haven't improved the explanation of the cause at all. And they're just saying magic did it. That's all they're really saying. There's nothing else there. Einstein didn't add one single grain of insight to the idea of what gravity was being caused by, and yet they say he somehow explained it. He didn't explain anything. He just said it's a magical thing that creates the inverse square law. Newton could have said it's a magical thing that creates the inverse square law. But he wasn't. Newton was a scientist. He wouldn't say something that silly.
Isn't a final theory. Maybe there is another deeper layer below it. The fourth and final reason is the requirements of.
Whoa, sorry. So that why are they doing this fat girl thing? Oh, God. Why do that to me? Anyway, horror. Anyway, where the hell was I? Something to do with, the fact that Einstein was just so full of shit because his own gravity theory was clearly spooky action. He didn't have any explanation for why it happens. Ugh. All right, I'll take a pause. All right, so again, the premise for this kind of argument is what are you trying to do? So obviously, again, I'll state, seeing an effect, it's because the effect has made itself, different than what was going on. Something's bouncing, something's wobbling, something's doing something. So you see the effect. And then you're saying, well, shouldn't I just be able to go look that way and I'll see the cause? No, it isn't going to work that way, right? Because the cause can be really complicated. The cause of the sentence I'm just going to say now and the words in it could be something that happened to me 10 years ago. I mean, and for 10 years, the thing has been bouncing around, so to speak, inside me as a function. And that's why it finally has an opportunity to mold a sentence or a concept. And, so the cause is going to be a lot harder to see because it's going to be made out of something smaller than the affected object. And so that's the challenge of physics, is to understand that it's, they have to guess at causes. And they have to admit that they're just guessing. And obviously the current guesses suck because they are ununified and they are nonsensical. And they are extraordinarily bizarre and nonsensical. Expanding universes, dark matter, antimatter. I mean, come on, it's too ridiculous.
Beauty and simplicity, yet these are frequently used in their construction. One of the examples of this I've already talked about previously. It's a mathematical assumption called naturalness, but the theory of everything might just not be.
Oh, so we could argue that normalization, that's another word they use for when they completely cheat the math. So the math doesn't really work, and they make sure that the math can't go here and it can't go there because it can't do that. It can't work in the whole system. It can only work in this little shred of pie of it. And that became a legitimate way of doing science. Just forget about the parts that don't fit. Sweep them under the rug.
Natural in this sense. So if you assume that it must be, you'll not find what you're looking for. There are other such requirements. For example, a lot of approaches to a theory of everything start from symmetries. There are historic...
So whatever, symmetry just comes out of this idea that simplicity can't create odd or weird or any of that kind of stuff. It can't do anything complicated. So yes, it's going to be simple.
Precedents for this, of course. Symmetries have worked great for the standard model, but maybe it's time to ask where the symmetries come from. Maybe the symmetries
So symmetry would just be, you can make a line and you'd have, a center of the line, and you'd have half the line over there and half the line over there, half a square over there, half a square over there, half a circle over there, half a circle over there. I mean, it just has to do with the simplicity of geometry in a sense. The symmetry is built in, to the simplicity.
Selves emerge from something else. That theory which explains everything. If I listen to myself, which I sometimes try but rarely enjoy, then this brings...
So I have exactly the opposite experience. Listening to you fuckheads bugs the crap out of me. Listening to me is just so comforting and relaxing. So sensible. So real.
Brings me to the somewhat odd conclusion that the most promising approach to a theory of everything that we have is Penrose's idea of...
Oh, fuck. The woo will be just more woo, 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 woo.
gravitationally induced collapse because
yeah, they're talking now that the whole universe is inside of a black hole. I mean, they just make up all these silly fucking stories. It's just pathetic.
you see, first of all, it's actually taking the measurement problem seriously. Second, it does include both gravity and quantum theory, and while Penrose never looked at this, I'm sure that this measurement process would also work for the Standard Model. Third,
so there's just nothing here. There's no detail about how this unifies anything or fixes anything. Nothing. There's no indication that there's a thread of usefulness in it in terms of fixing anything broken. Not even, she can't explain how this is actually an improvement. Because if it was, they'd be saying, oh yeah, let's do this. It makes perfectly good sense. No one's saying that.
Penrose doesn't make any final theory claim. And fourth, he doesn't make any extra assumptions, no new symmetries, no supposedly natural constants.
No explanation of anything either.
Wasn't Penrose's model recently experimentally falsified? No, actually not. What was experimentally ruled out is what...
So again, they're ruling, when they rule things out, it's just, the experiment's way too complicated to draw these conclusions, and they're just too easily do that. And it's just wrong. I mean, they have all kinds of assumptions in their theories about how something functions. They don't even understand how, a piece of dark glass doesn't stop photons. It degrades them. It breaks them. The energy's still getting through the glass. The glass doesn't stop the photons and get hot. It's like a polarizing film. It doesn't stop photons. It breaks them. They're still there. They're still in pieces. They're just disoriented photons. And you just need to reorient them to make them back into functioning photons.
It's been called the Penrose-Diossi model, but I'm not sure why this even has Penrose's name attached to it. The Penrose-Diossi model is clearly non-local and not generally covariant, so I'm not surprised it's trouble. Don't get me wrong, it's great that it's been tested and great that it's been ruled out so that we can move on, but
bizarre.
Penrose's idea doesn't work like this. I hope that if you've been wondering what's going on with physicists and their theories of everything, this gives you an impression for what's going wrong. If you're working...
So what is that mush? You got to get outside the box. The box is full of bullshit. If you don't step outside the box, you're not going to get any right answers.
On your own theory of everything, I hope this gives you some inspiration. And if this video...
So again, there's nothing inspirational about it because it doesn't get to these core points that, well, if you had to build an elemental universe yourself, how would you build it? I mean, the simple mechanism is you have something called energy bang into something and impose motion. There's no pull, there could only be a push. That kind of elemental thinking, and there's none of that in any of this context. None of these people are thinking elementally.
Inspired you to get started on your own theory of everything, I recommend you check out the physics and maths courses on Brilliant.
Yes, I recommend, because they pay me to recommend it. So I guess that's all she's going to do. Yeah, just a big, long, stupid commercial. All right. So, I don't even know why YouTube doesn't protest in some way when people do that. Like, demonetize them or something. Because they're basically putting commercials in the video that YouTube doesn't make any money on. And so YouTube is just creating a platform for somebody else's advertisements, which doesn't make much sense. But anyway, nothing makes any sense. because these people are arrogant, obnoxious, shit-talking douchebags. Yeah, they're not really good thinkers or scientists. They're not careful, they're not thoughtful, and they're not worried enough about fucking up. So anyway, till the next time and such. And so just garbage. There wasn't anything of value there. It'd be nice if people could have the conversation about, okay, how do you build this, a rational theory, and start with something elemental, something simple. And they just won't have that conversation. The whole idea of just even me saying, well, what if? What if you gave some stuff in the universe the motion, and that stuff shared its motion with other stuff that didn't have motion, like electrons and protons? It's such a simple way of understanding the difference between the force and matter. The force is matter, very small matter, that has motion, and the matter is bigger stuff that doesn't. And my point is it works very well as a theory of energy. So anyway, till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. I mean, I just listened to some Feynman stuff, and he was talking about that whole concept of energy and how, well, it doesn't appear to be quantized. Well, that's only because you can't, it's very small. But there's no reason to think it's not, because it's behaving so conservationally. And so the very idea that you can't measure this tiny discrete bit of energy, and so why bother saying it's not quantized when that's only because you can't see it? It's too small. I can't see the electrons and protons. I shouldn't say this isn't made out of quanta of matter, because just because I can't see it, that's not very scientific. All right, so till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. Blah 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 blah. Hate this planet. Dumbass all the way down.